Okay, today what we're going to take a look at is some alternate bass for beginners to fingerstyle or beginners to alternate bass style in any case. Now, alternate bass gets its name because the thumb, which is playing the bass notes, alternates between two bass notes. Now, there are lots of different styles of alternate bass, and you will find it referred to as lots of different names. So sometimes Piedmont style for blues, or in country music has a number of different names, but they all boil down to the same approach. We're going to be looking at the most simple alternate bass pattern, where the bass just has two notes. There are some more complicated versions, but I'm not going to go through those today. So here I've grabbed a C chord, and all my thumb is doing is just alternating between the A string and the D string. Now, C is a really popular key for this style. So let's have a look at a really simple chord change. So we're going to go from the C to a fingerstyle F, which is thumb over. Now, I particularly like thumb over for fingerstyle guitar, for an F. So my thumb is on the first fret of the bottom E, and then third finger is on the third fret of the D, second finger, second fret of the G, first finger, first fret of the B. Now the A string is muted there just a little by the tip of my third finger or the pad of my thumb, but because I'm fingerstyle, I just don't have to play the A string, so that's fine. And with it being an F, if the A string did ring, it's not the most unpleasant sound. It's not perfect, but it's okay. So let's just alternate between the C and this fingerstyle F, and you can see that my second and third finger just move as a unit up to the F and then back down to the C, like that. So our bass pattern on the C is going to be the A and the D string, and then when we shift to the F, the low E and the D string. Now, it's about this point some of you may realise that the thumb over F is particularly uncomfortable for you. Now, I would really recommend you sticking with it. It's so well used by guitar players, and for good reason. It gives us that low string. However, if just for the moment you want to get into some alternate bass and you just cannot hack that thumb over, keep practicing it, but also you can just switch your bass up to the D and the G strings on the F, and you don't need to worry about that thumb over at all, and that would sound like this. Okay, so that's the bass sorted out, but of course alternate bass is based on the bass, but really the style is all about the melody notes. So a discussion of melody notes for alternate bass is going to really, or should really, think about the 4 different slots where a melody note could exist. So let's think about that. A melody note could fall at exactly the same time as the low bass. So for example, if we were going to pick let's just pick a string. Let's pick the B string. So all I'm doing there is I'm pinching with the thumb and the first finger, and my thumb's on the A string because I'm on the C chord, and my first finger is on the B string, and I'm just pinching those two strings together at the same time. I could pinch every low bass if I wanted. There we go. That's the first slot in which a melody note can exist. The second slot, in order of them falling within the bar, would be straight after the low bass, but before the high bass. So what I would call an alternate melody. So there, what I'm doing is I'm plucking the low bass, and then my first finger's catching the B string, and then we've got the high bass, which is the D string. Okay, the next slot as we move through that a melody note could fall in would be with exactly the same time as the high bass, which would be like this. So there, I'm playing my low bass, and then I'm going to do a pinch with my high bass on the D and the B string. Okay, so fairly straightforward if you're following so far. Obviously feel free to rewind if there's anything that needs a little bit more practice. Okay, and then the fourth slot for a melody note would be after the high bass but before the low bass, so another alternate melody note there. So we get the low bass, high bass melody. And there my thumb's hitting the A for the low bass, and then the high bass on the D string, and then we're plucking the melody note and then going directly back to the low bass. Now those are the four slots where a melody note could exist. So let's have a look at some very simple patterns without necessarily looking at a full melody being played, which might use some of these slots. So one of the most common patterns you find with alternate bass, which is purely textural and not necessarily melodic, would be the low bass, then for example a G string, and then the high bass, and then the B string. Both melody notes on alternate, so very simple pattern there. I'll just run through that a few more times. Now we could then take that pattern and transfer it to our second chord, which is the F chord, which I'm going to play thumb over, and then I'm going to go low bass is the low E, then I've still got my G string, high bass on the D, and then the B string. So then my pattern runs like this. Okay, and then we can switch between the C and the F like this. And you can probably hear that I'm using that C note, which is on the first fret of the B. I'm using the sustain on that note to make a nice smooth transition between the two chords. Okay, now the next thing we need to talk about really is anticipation, but I'm going to leave that for another video. So what we've seen so far is how the bass moves between two different chords, the different slots that a melody note can fall into, and we've looked at a very simple alternating pattern for running through chords. Obviously you could bolt that style onto any chord change, and I would highly recommend you having a look at different chord changes and seeing how they work with the alternate bass and which strings you need to change your bass note to. Okay, anyway, happy practicing.